Gord Johns for participating today. We're absolutely delighted to host you. And,
That's great. Sorry,
go ahead, please.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to be with Startup Canada. You're doing such important work, and I'm extremely grateful to be invited to participate today.
Well, we're delighted to host you in certainly different circumstances now from the last time we saw you, which was our reception for International Women's Day, which feels like a decade ago now.
Yeah, really, it does. I mean, that was just in just not even a couple months ago, really.
I know.
And we didn't even get a chance to celebrate that before we had to turn our heads to this tragic situation that we're all facing. And but it's certainly something we as the Entrepreneur Caucus love to sponsor. We love to facilitate entrepreneurs and business organizations on the Hill. It's always a thrill for myself and my fellow co-chairs, Ruby Sahota and Dean Allison. We've been doing this together now for 5 years. So, it's been really nice to work with them across political lines. And we certainly have a lot in common when it comes to small business. There's not a lot of partisanship there.
Absolutely. You're the three amigos, the best three amigos.
Yeah, I like that. That's
but
fun.
It was an incredible celebration, and really that was the last in-person event that I've attended. And we do a lot of events, and so it's wonderful that we're able to pivot and host these types of webinars. But I'm looking forward to being able to obviously get back out there and have that personal touch when you're able to actually see the person eyeball to eyeball in real time as opposed to virtually.
Absolutely.
Well, to all of you who are participating today, wherever you are in the country, thank you so very much. Why don't you take a seat if you're not in a comfortable position now. It's interesting, you're hearing about all these different make work setup concoctions that people are figuring out in terms of where they work. So I've heard everything from working at the kitchen counter to converting their couch into a workspace, or their lazy boy now is their armchair that they would normally use at the desk. So it's interesting to see where people are working. So wherever you are and wherever you're comfortably seated, I welcome you today to Startup Canada's Entrepreneur Town Hall. And this is really meant to have a robust conversation with you, Gord Johns, to learn more about what's going on at your riding, and certainly hear from the entrepreneurs from across the country as well as your riding, to gain intel and insight into the reality of the situation on the ground. So with that being said, we'll officially begin. So again, thank you so very much for joining us for Startup Canada's Entrepreneur Town Hall, where parliamentarians and entrepreneurs can share insights and knowledge regarding the changing landscape during COVID-19, and it's ever changing. Now, we had the pleasure of hosting MP Ruby Sahota and MP Dean Allison over the last 2 weeks, and I'm delighted to announce that we will be hosting Minister Ng next Tuesday at 12:30 Eastern, and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade, Rachel Van Dayen, on May 6th at 2 p.m. Now, we will continue to host just as many conversations and sessions as possible, in addition to our Women Entrepreneur webinars. So please visit startupcanada.ca to learn more. My name is Natasha Morano, and I am the Director of Corporate and Government Affairs at Startup Canada. Now, today I am delighted to host co-chair of the All-Party Entrepreneur Caucus and Member of Parliament for Courtenay-Alberni, Mr. Gord Johns. Thank you, MP Johns, for participating today and for being such a champion for entrepreneurs in Startup Canada. We so appreciate your support. Now, today, Gord and I will discuss the entrepreneur ecosystem, challenges that entrepreneurs are experiencing during COVID-19, and ways the Government of Canada and members of Parliament from across the country are actively working to support entrepreneurs and small businesses. We're also pleased to have received so many questions from the audience, and I will do my absolute best to get to as many of them as possible. Now, before we begin, I would like to provide just a little bit of context as to why the conversations like the one that we're about to have today is so important. Startup Canada is the national rallying community and voice for Canada's 3.5 million entrepreneurs. And COVID-19 has had a profound and unique impact on each and every one of them. Now, despite these current challenges, Startup Canada is committed to serving Canadian business And part of our response is hosting a series of these town halls to gain insight and intel into what is happening right across the country. There are so many voices and stories to be heard and told. And today I would like to shine the light on the riding of Courtenay-Alberni. Gord, we're so fortunate to host you today and participate, and you certainly offer a unique perspective because not only are you the member of parliament for your riding, but you're also an entrepreneur. So you live and breathe this. You know what it means to be an entrepreneur, and you know what that embodies. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be on this call, Natasha. And, you know, I am privileged to live in a riding called Courtenay-Alberni, which is the center of Vancouver Island. And it stretches from Tofino on the west coast, which is the highest median age in the province of BC, to Cumberland, British Columbia on the northeast, which also has the lowest median age in British Columbia between the two, which is where Mount Washington is, a big ski hill. So the only riding in the country where you can ski and surf. And then of course we've got the oldest demographic in Parksville and Qualicum, which is a great retirement center, incredible beaches, and great hiking through the Alberni Valley, and fishing, of course, from Banfield to Heshquit. We've got 10 First Nations communities, Indigenous communities in my riding. There's 31 communities in my riding. Most of them are very small. Of course, small business is the job creator in our communities. Most of them have started with people creating their own jobs. Tourism is the number one industry. Of course, fishing and forestry are very important, but we have almost 10,000 jobs in our riding directly related to tourism. Wow. So, of course, with COVID and the impact of COVID heading into our tourist season, it is just having an absolutely devastating impact on our local economy. And of course, the multiplier effect of the impact on those businesses is having a really, difficult challenge for everybody in our economy, whether you're in tourism or not. These conversations are so important, and I'm so grateful to Startup Canada for the work that you've been doing, really working closely with Dean Allison, my Conservative colleague, and Ruby Sahota, my Liberal colleague, that we're the co-chairs of the Entrepreneur Caucus. We've been doing this together for 5 years. One thing we have in common is we care deeply about small business. So a lot of our conversations aren't partisan, and when there's issues, we bring parliamentarians together to sit down, listen to small business people, try to find pathways to support them. And we've worked very hard together. So, my riding is, no different than any riding in this country. Small business is a really important key component of the economy here. And so looking forward to today's conversation. And these conversations are absolutely critical so we can learn from each other, and certainly for me to have an ear to small business and hear the concerns of small business owners, but also to share what information's out there and where we need to put pressure on the government to fill the gaps where the gaps are, so that nobody gets left behind. We went into this hole in terms of this crisis. Let's come out of this hole. And it's going to be a really difficult challenge, as we know, and we're all going to have to be creative in how we're going to get through this.
Absolutely. And, we really are in this together. This is part of the solution. This is part of the whole. Now, you mentioned that you're riding forestry, fishery, ecotourism are some of the key sort of economic drivers of the riding. So how have those sectors really been impacted by COVID-19, and how have they maybe had to pivot? What does it look like for those key drivers in your riding?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Of course, on the tourism side, when we have a shutdown of the global economy and transportation is literally shut down and non-essential travel is closed, obviously not encouraged. This is a huge impact on the economy, to the restaurateurs, hospitality, ecotourism-based businesses, to merchants, to everyone. Mm-hmm. And it's really creating huge challenges, a lot of concerns, obviously, people that are wondering how long they can go. We're hearing right across the board from CFIB, they're saying that only 25% of businesses in Canada have enough cash flow to last another month or beyond another month of this. In British Columbia, it's upwards of 50%. They're saying that actually almost 50% don't even know if they can make it through this crisis. So these are scary numbers. And of course, commercial rent is a big issue. We've seen, 38% of people, according to SaveSmallBusiness.ca, didn't make rent on April 1st. We're going to see upwards of 70% on May 1st. So we've supported them, the NDP, with a proposal to the government to come up with a rent abatement program, similar to what they've done in Australia and Denmark and the UK and France, where they've all come up with different models. So these are the issues that we're hearing right now is the immediate concern and supports, and is some gaps in programs, of course. And in forestry, I mean, the markets are drying up, of course, globally, whether it be fisheries or forestry. The fisheries is a serious issue because, we've got fishers lined up ready to go catch, and they don't have those global food chains going right now. Right. So it's maybe creating some new ideas like a national food procurement strategy to support those fishers, and supporting domestic supporting industries with domestic purchasing, and that would be a big help to that sector, for example. And so we're looking at all these sectors, and everybody's adjusting, they're retooling, and they're pivoting, and so there's a lot of that going on. And so we'll talk today a lot more about how we can support people through that process.
Well, speaking of support, I'm curious to know how you are able to ensure that the voices of your constituents are being heard. So are there any local resources available? Is there a website that your constituents can go to outside of your own website? What are some different tools that you're using and resources to support your constituents?
That's a great question. We've done a number of ways that people can communicate with us. We did a telephone town hall where we called every number we had in our database for the whole riding. Yeah, and we had the medical health officer of British Columbia, the island here, North Island, join us. We had our local MLA, who's also the Minister of Indigenous and Crown Relations, on our call. And we fielded calls and questions from constituents that were worried about how they were going to be impacted by COVID, what supports there were, but also, of course, using social media has been absolutely essential, working with local TV networks, getting stories out, communicating through all the different mediums that we can, and channels to communicate out. But of course, directing people to the right places. So the Government of Canada, their emergency response website is very detailed. If you go there, you can easily see, what programs are there. The problem is, and I think it's difficult for all of us, it's changing by the day. The federal government is literally rolling out policy that would take years to develop in a matter of days. And the public service, most of them are actually working from home. So as we know, we've had over 7 million people get the CERB benefit, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. This is just absolutely heroic what the public service has been able to do from their homes, really. And but there's a business COVID-19 support service the BC government has got, and it's a one-stop shop. So they've got the federal government, the province of BC supports, and most provinces throughout Canada have really good websites. So I encourage people to go to those websites, to draw on the information there, but also to work with the BDC, their community futures development corporations, ensuring that they're in touch with them to make sure they know what programs are being offered. We've got economic development groups like Innovation Vancouver Island, which really help with the tech sector and help businesses get really web ready, tech ready, so that they can move their product to, obviously those medians to get their product to market. So there is many supports and really innovative programs that are being launched very quickly.
You're absolutely right. There's so much innovation in Canada as a whole, and it's really interesting to look at the ways organizations and even the government is getting innovative with the way they're able to provide resources to, its citizens. I live in Ottawa and I live in the market, and it's really interesting to see how some of the small businesses here, those mom and pop shops, have completely pivoted, and they're still able to figure out a way to contribute to the economy as well as ensure that they can keep their lights on. So I think that really at the helm of the part of the solution in this is that innovation piece, which I'm sure we'll come back to later. So now let's talk a little bit more about what the Government of Canada is doing specifically pertaining to support for entrepreneurs. Gord, you're passionate about human rights and the environment, and it's National Earth Day, I believe. So happy National Earth Day to everyone. And we applaud you for being such a supporter of the environment. It's so incredibly important. And I think that, being a global citizen and being conscious of, your actions in how you operate as a human on this planet certainly will play into the solution for, resolving COVID-19. So I just wanted to do a special shout out for your support for the environment on Earth Day. But as a former small business owner, the challenges facing Canadians today that are, trying to run their small businesses. And the government has certainly been working endlessly on trying to address the ever-changing needs of citizens, as well as the ever-changing needs that COVID-19 is putting in front of us daily, if not hourly. And so maybe you can provide us with just a little bit of insight into what the government is doing to support entrepreneurs and small businesses specifically. So maybe we could talk a little bit about the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, a little bit more about the Canada Emergency Response Benefit Program, and how those specific programs can help entrepreneurs, and how perhaps some of those programs are also supporting your constituents.
Oh, great. Good question. That's a lot to unpack. I will do my best here. First, I agree. Happy 50th anniversary of Earth Day.
Wow.
It's a big milestone. And I want to thank all of those entrepreneurs that are doing their individual and collective part to obviously defend this planet and to do everything they can to protect Mother Earth. And it's something that we're all grateful for. It is an interesting, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we lost you there for a second.
Good.
That's okay,
Excellent.
your name came up, so we still knew who we were talking to.
There's a number of programs, and the government, again, is doing this incredible job, this heroic effort to roll out programs to try to capture everybody. That hasn't quite happened yet. So it's, of course, our job in opposition to bring forward solutions, and, of course, government members where there is gaps. So the Canada Emergency Bank Account is a very important one. It's where the government will loan up to $40,000 to entrepreneurs. $10,000 of that comes back as a subsidy or grant, if you want to call it, if you repay that loan by December of 2022. So you have 2 years to pay it back. It's important, obviously critical for businesses to get cash flow, but the grant is a key piece to help you, especially those businesses that have literally lost all their revenue, which is 80% of businesses have somewhat closed, actually, I think, only 20% are open and 30% are partially open. So wow. This is most businesses are closed, so they have zero revenue coming in. So this is an absolutely really important piece. There is some flaws with the program in that you have a requirement of having a payroll between 20,000 and 1.5 million. So that was just changed. It used to be 50,000 to 1 million. We pushed our party to have it absolutely just remove that requirement, because there's so many proprietors that don't have payroll, a lot of mom and pop businesses or right. people that are individuals. And sadly, about 25% of businesses actually aren't able to access any of the programs that are being rolled out, especially startups, of course. So we're asking the government to drop that requirement, or to use another measurement like gross revenue. Should someone have sales of $200,000 a year, they're collecting $14,000 in the GST or GST portion of the HST, if you're outside of British Columbia. And so that would be another way that they could propose and look at it. So we're encouraging the government to make sure those that can access that loan have other medians and opportunities to access that loan. And they could even look at a micro portion of it where they look at sales of, say, 50,000, and maybe they only offer a loan of 10,000, 2,500 non-repayable. So we're encouraging the government to expand that to capture those that are falling out of that area. And of course, the wage subsidy, which is really important. There's a 10% wage subsidy if you haven't had a decline in business of over 15% in March and or 30% in April and May. That's a very important subsidy, the wage subsidy, for people to keep their staff on payroll. They can make sure that their staff get paid up to 75% of the wages and maxing out at $847 a week. But it makes sure you've got that relationship with your employees, whether you're closed or not. And also that they can stay on their benefits, their extended benefits, if you've got them on extended benefits. And of course, you want to take care of your number one asset, and that's your staff. So that's a really important program. And the CERB, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, again, it's a great program for those that have zero revenue coming in or less than $1,000 in income coming in. They can access that $2,000 benefit. We're glad to see that broadened so that it did include entrepreneurs. The flaw there is how do they determine the $1,000 in income? Because you might be a proprietor and draw $3,000 of gross income, and your expenses might be $6,000, and you have a net loss of $3,000, and you're still not able to apply for that benefit. So we're encouraging the government to look at net profit versus income on because many proprietors are being left out of that important benefit as well. So we're working with the government, and one thing I can say is they work really well with us, really closely with the NDP in terms of making adjustments to their program. We're hoping they'll continue to make those adjustments as we go down this path. And of course, the rent abatement proposal that we put before government, we're working with SaveSmallBusiness.ca and listening to small business that this is absolutely critical, for small businesses to survive. And this is being done in other countries. So the government is doing some great programs, really important investments in small business, but they do need to go even further like other countries have. And we're also saying to government, invest now and you'll save a lot of money in the long run, because losing small businesses on our main streets of our country and the jobs lost and the multiplier effect will cost us so much more in the long run. So, so this is kind of where we're at, is trying to plug those gaps and communicate that on a regular basis with the government.
Absolutely. Now, can you share a little bit more information about the work sharing program and how can this be leveraged to support your community? And has there been successes with this program?
It's actually a really great program. For example, first the government's extended it from 38 weeks to I believe 76 weeks.
It was a big extension, yeah.
Yeah, and basically the model is that half of the wage would come from the company and half on EI. So you could have, say you've got a couple of employees that you're worried, you want to keep them in the business, doing some work and attachment to the business. They're key employees in making sure that your company is retooling, getting ready for after we get through the big peak of the pandemic, and getting your business ready. And you need them, but you maybe can't have them on full time. This is an opportunity where you can have a couple of those employees job share, split that job, and you could have them both stay on payroll and the government pick up the other half on EI. So this is something that I think most businesses understand. They want to keep their employees connected to the business instead of just having them absent and completely gone and move away from the business. They need them because they're an essential part of the business in the long run, and they probably got projects they're working on. So there's lots of ways you can look at it.
Yeah, and it keeps, I think from both the employer and the employee standpoint, it keeps them at least engaged in some capacity, right? I mean, when you work so hard and you're so committed to the particular cause, for that to just dry up, it's wonderful that there's still at least an opportunity to contribute, even if it's in a small fashion. So I'm wondering if there's any other financial assistance available that perhaps society doesn't know about, or maybe a program or an opportunity that's not getting enough attention, especially with how that pertains to supporting entrepreneurs and small businesses. Is there anything that you know about?
There's many programs that the BDC and the local Community Futures Development Corporation, if you live in a rural community, are offering. Of course, I've got an economic development group called Innovation Vancouver Island. They're offering this program called the DER3, and it's the Digital Economy Rapid Response Recovery Program.
Oh,
And
neat.
they're helping businesses get tech ready. Of course, it couldn't be more important than right now. These are kind of innovative programs in each regional development organization. I think it's really important that businesses do a few things, and that is, one, make sure your books are up to date. Work really quickly on getting yourself ready for that. It's really easy to get caught up in working, in overdrive to keep the revenue coming in.
Sure.
But making sure you put 2-3 hours aside a day to be talking to your bookkeeper. Most people don't talk to their bookkeeper or their accountant more than once a month. This is a time where you're talking to them every week. Making sure that you're looking at having these calls, talking to these government organizations, looking at their websites regularly, because again, it's evolving by the day, and that you're applying for every program that's out there that you can, looking at all the resources that are available for you, talking to mentors, business leaders. There might be someone in your sector that's aging and they were thinking about getting out, looking at partnering, looking at ways that you might want to work with other entrepreneurs that typically might be competitors, but right now they might be more willing to be working with you in unison. So I really believe that conversation and using all the tools and resources is a critical use of your time.
Absolutely. And you raised a very good point, speaking to your accountant and, carving out the time to get your books in order, because those are tasks that, not the average person really tends to enjoy, crunching numbers and, really getting your microscope out in terms of analyzing numbers. But I think now is the time to absolutely do that. Personally speaking, I also had to have a conversation with my accountant, and normally, you can get an appointment within 2-3 days. It took a week. So accountants are in high demand right now. So for those of you listening, if you have not arranged to have an appointment with your accountant, do so, because I'm sure the demand is just going to increase as the days unfold. And the role of mentorship, I think that's also an incredible point to mention, is that everybody needs to have their own support network. And so if you have someone in the sector that you look up to, I'm sure now is the time where, they would love to hear from you and just talk about best practices, and know that the lines of communication are open, and that, again, I hate to keep saying this, but we are in this together, and we need to rely on resources that are available, even in the role of mentorship with other individuals. I have a question now, just a spontaneous question here to throw it at you, but do you have a mentor?
Oh, I have so many mentors. I am very fortunate, not just in my political life and my caucus, but many elders in our communities that I seek out for advice, and many leaders, and some of them are young leaders. So I'm often communicating to the people in my life that are, have experience, have had success, but also those that are living experience. So I was an entrepreneur for 14 years, and then I ran a chamber of commerce for 5, an award-winning chamber of commerce in Tofino, BC.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, it was very good. And so I'm often, going back to the entrepreneurs and those business organizations, and I rely on them heavily. They're at the grassroots, they're on the street level. Business people that are running their businesses, especially those really successful entrepreneurs, and I'm able to go to them and ask them, what is it that we can do to best support you? Mm-hmm. So I rely on businesses from right across the country, and their stories are powerful. And it's those stories that help us shape policy in this country. And of course, I identified earlier some of the gaps in the programs and the rollout of the federal government. And this isn't a slag on the federal government. This is, that they're rolling out big policy very quickly. And of course, they're going to, miss a few people along the way. And our job is to help bring to the attention of government those that are getting missed, and how we can best support them so we can get through this. So, I'm just loaded with mentors, to be honest with you.
That's
and
amazing.
Experts in so many areas, including Startup Canada, have been really helpful in helping us understand, the needs of small business. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And, we have a resource website available. We're continuously updating information. We're holding our digital platforms. We've launched a survey because, part of our job is to learn from individuals right across the country into what you're experiencing. So for those of you listening today, thank you. We simply could not do what we do without you and without your intel and your insights. So continue to share information with us and let us know, what it's looking like for you. Can you share some stories, both good and bad? I mean, we want this to be as realistic as possible, about how some small businesses in your riding have had to pivot, and just give us a little bit of insight. I know when we had a conversation a little while ago, Gord, you had mentioned, I think it was a small business that was developing shields to protect.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. I mean, there's some great stories, some heroic stories of businesses that are doing their piece and their part to help our frontline service workers, literally saving lives, slowing down the spread. Yeah. One of them is a fellow named Kevin Wright, Port-Alberni, BC. He is taking his 3D printers and also working with the city of Port-Alberni, and he's using them to create PPE, personal protective equipment, so that he protects those frontline service workers, fire department and RCMP and many different essential service workers. So they have the protective equipment. We've got distilleries that have converted their operations to come up with hand sanitation to support those essential service workers as well. So there's been some heroic stories. And then there's also the difficult stories. We've had people that, like myself, I was one of the casualties to the recession in 2008, and it was really difficult. The recession doesn't even pale in comparison to what people are facing today. And I remember how scared I was for my employees, for my family, for my customers who loved my business, in December of 2008, when my sales dropped 75% at our Victoria operation overnight. That's what I know people are facing right now. It's zero for many, and they're scared. And so I've had people that have literally thrown up their arms and said, I'm walking away from this. I don't want to get into more debt. And we've encouraged them to just hang on just a little bit longer. We've asked landlords to hang on before they put the locks on doors. Some haven't. Some have already started, locking the doors on their tenants. And we're begging everybody to be calm, and while the government continues their rollout, because as the federal government rolls out their programs, the provinces are able to then make the moves they need to fill those gaps. And that's what you're going to see over the next few days, I imagine, and next week, is a lot of provinces starting to do another rollout to help protect those small businesses. And the Prime Minister, he did hear loud and clear our proposal of the need for a rent abatement program. If people want to read, there's a great story in the Tyee and the National Observer about what we're proposing. And also on my website, a letter we wrote to the government around that. But we're hoping that the government will roll that out quickly, because again, 8 days from now is rent day. So we've had some tough stories. Again, people having the locks on their doors, other individuals that are working, keeping their business going, and they shouldn't be. They're worried about their health. I've got a 70-year-old couple that runs a fish and chip business, and they want to be closed. They've got health issues. Their health is compromised, and of course they're concerned about COVID, but they have to pay the rent. And so they're on takeout, and they've laid off their whole staff. I'm worried about them. And if they had their rent covered, they wouldn't be open. They would be doing what they should be doing, staying home, protecting their family, protecting themselves. So these are the difficult stories that I'm hearing from people that can't access that loan because they don't have a payroll. They're working 6 days a week. They might have a staffer that works 1 day a week in their operation, or they can't collect CERB because they're, like I said, maybe they've closed their store, but they're doing a couple grand online, and they don't qualify, and they're worried about how they're going to feed their family. And they're also suddenly a teacher, for their kids at home because their kids can't go to school. So a lot of people that are worried about their future, and so the government, we can get the government to close those gaps in the next few days, next week, then I'll feel a lot more confident that we're going to get through this. And as we get through the peak and we start to reopen, but we also want to make sure that businesses are looking forward, that there might be another peak again. And so that people are retooling and having that in mind, ensuring that their cash flows are in place, and everything we can do to support people. So lots of good stories, a lot of tough stories.
Right. And I think too, I mean, the topic of mental health and stress for entrepreneurs, it's multidimensional because, you know, you're looking at and you're feeling that stress, not only of your business, which has become your baby, but also your family, yourself, your loved ones. It's just, it's all encompassing this stress. But, you know, hearing about those stories of inspiration and those stories of positivity, I know me personally, that helps me get through the day. It helps me know that there's still a lot of hope out there. And it's wonderful to hear about some of the ways that these small businesses are pivoting. And I think, you know, distilleries, what they've done is so incredible. I mean, it's truly inspiring. So being the co-chair of the All-Party Entrepreneur Caucus, from what I gather, the whole sort of ethos and modus operandi of this caucus was for parliamentarians to hear directly from entrepreneurs, so you can you know, cultivate a strong, robust partnership. And so, how or if is this caucus being utilized during COVID-19? And is there anything going on behind the scenes that perhaps the general public doesn't know about pertaining to the All-Party Entrepreneur Caucus?
Well, that's a great question. You know, Dean Allison and Ruby Sahota and myself, we're all really good friends. We put the partisan politics aside always. We care deeply about small business. Whenever there's an issue, we try to bring forums together. There was a time when the government rolled out some tax changes. They scaled some back as a result of some of the work we did. We had a forum. And we invited business leaders from across Canada to come and attend that and share their perspective. In fact, Minister Ng was an MP. She didn't have a title back then, and she was attending, and she helped us work with her community and relay the concerns from them to the government, and they made some changes to that policy. Whenever you roll out policy, there's always things that you might not have considered, and you get a chance to hear from the entrepreneurs, those that are affected most, how you can make that policy work a little bit better. So that's our role. We're always doing that. When it comes to COVID, we haven't necessarily had a call or an event. You're doing that work with us, and I think that's really the priority. Is to work with business groups, knowing that they've got the three of us there, and we're always a yes. You'll never very often hear us say no, that we're not going to help provide in the conversation. Behind the scenes, though, there's a lot of work being done. You know, I'm talking to Minister Ng on a regular basis. Every single day, a lot of people don't know, there's an MP phone call. 338 MPs on a phone call for an hour every single day since March 15th, except for Easter Sunday and Easter. Yeah, it was only Easter Sunday. 7 days a week, we've all been on that call. We bring our concerns to senior government officials. And of course, many ministers are listening in, and we get to ask some tough questions of government as they're doing the rollout. And a lot of these, you know, senior level government officials are working obviously around the clock. So it is a tremendous national effort where we really do feel like we're working together. And that, I would say, the small business and concerns from small business, never do we go through a meeting without your concerns coming up. It comes up every meeting. We're troubleshooting with a lot of the concerns I talked about today. We're bringing them to government. They are making some adjustments. We're going to keep pushing them to make more so that nobody's left behind. But really our relationship is to bring back to our caucuses the concerns. So Ruby and Dean and I are doing that. We're hearing from groups like Startup Canada, entrepreneurs that we're meeting in our communities, working with our provincial counterparts, sharing with them, coming back, bringing it to our caucuses. And of course, you know, we've got our critics and the minister that are listening. And so it's an opportunity for us to really do an important part. And it's very, very progressive in a sense that we are very much trying to work together. And that's the spirit of the Entrepreneur Caucus.
Absolutely. And I think this is actually a beautiful segue into launching our questions from the audience. So perhaps you can take some of these questions and concerns from your constituents virtually back to Ottawa. So we have about 20 minutes left. I'm hoping that we can get through all of these. So let's get started. Here's some questions from the audience. First question: what do you foresee the process of rental and lease payments moving forward looking like, specifically in relation to commercial properties in the food service industry?
Yeah, good question. Well, first of all, the food service industry is absolutely getting annihilated. Lease and rents are a massive expense. They're second only to human resources when it comes to costs for a restaurant or many businesses for that matter. And I certainly understand it as someone who owned 5 retail stores and a bike rental business for many years, the importance of getting support during times like this. Where, how do you pay rent when you have zero revenue coming in? And I know that's a concern I'm hearing from many tenants, where even the landlord who has to pay their mortgage is saying, hey, we need help. We can't defer the triple net costs,
Right.
which are often a third of what you're paying, or sometimes even more. And they're requiring the tenant to even come up with that. And it's pretty hard to find, nothing from nothing, find money from nothing. So,
Right.
we brought forward a proposal on April 9th. My colleague, Peter Julian, who's the finance critic for the NDP, and is, I'm the small business and tourism critic for the federal NDP, a proposal that was really created by SaveSmallBusiness.ca, a rent abatement program where the government would pick up the tab for 2/3 of rent up to $10,000 for 3 months, and the landlord would be on the hook for a third. So basically, the program would be that the landlord would eat a month, and the federal government would pick up 2 months. And it's very similar to what is being done in Australia, France, Denmark, and the UK. And of course, the US has a different program, but it does cover rent in their rollout as well. So it's something that we know that, again, when we're hearing numbers that 70% of people, small businesses, won't have rent covered by May 1st. This is a huge threat. By May 15th, everyone will be in violation of their lease of those 70%. And, so we need action on this quickly. We rolled out our pitch to the government. We're very happy to see the Prime Minister respond literally within a couple of days, and people again can read our proposal in the article in the Tyee or the National Observer. But what we were disappointed about is here we are, 9 days later since the Prime Minister committed to doing something about it, and we're 8 days away from rent day. And the Prime Minister said he had to consult with the provinces. He had a meeting with the premiers last Thursday. I know it was on the docket, but we haven't heard anything more. And the sense of urgency couldn't be more. And we're encouraging everyone to tweet and write the minister and the Prime Minister to encourage them to fast track the rollout of that program, because it's absolutely critical. And the restaurants, it's essential. $40,000 loan, even with a $10,000 rebate, it's just not enough. Small businesses don't want to go into more debt coming out of what will be a slow economy likely, and be able to cover that within 3 years. They actually need relief. So we've asked businesses to close down, to stop the spread and protect the health of our economy.
Right.
But they can't be the ones to shoulder all of it. We need to make sure that the government picks up the other part, and that's help them through this. So it couldn't be more important for the hospitality sector and restaurants.
Sure, and that actually was one of the other questions that we had, referring to other countries such as Denmark, Australia, and France, and commercial rent support. So you hit off 2 questions there. Thank you. You answered 2 questions. Then the next question I have here from a constituent is, will there be provisions to CEBA to accommodate for tourism in small businesses?
Well, that's a good question, and it's about making sure that there's no gaps on the CEBA rollout, and there is, like I've outlined, a lot of these tourism operators are proprietors, and they don't have payrolls. They're individuals, whether they're tour operators or small business people that have, a small takeout cafe or a restaurant, or they're just running a small boutique, and they haven't been able to access any of these programs. Just 25% of people that are running a business can't access any of the current rollout. So that, and of course, tourism is going to take the biggest hit in hospitality because
Sure.
of the nature of physical distancing. And, I live in a riding where tourism season is just starting right now. And here we are, we're people are desperate. They're concerned because they're going to lose cash flow in the biggest part of their tourist season. So we've identified in steps to the government through a letter, things that they need to adopt, but they do need to come back with a bigger support package for tourism. And right now, the urgency is filling the gaps in the programs that they've got, and of course the rent abatement program, and then start to look at the middle part of a strategy to help support entrepreneurs over the midterm, and then of course a long-term plan to how we rebuild those sectors, especially tourism, which is getting hit. Between tourism and health are the top sectors being hit right now.
Right. Another question we have here is, what government supports are in place for solo entrepreneurs? And we've talked about sole proprietor-led companies and small businesses impacted by COVID-19. The question is, will there be any consideration for other company structures that pay employees in other innovative ways?
It's a good question. It's a question that's coming up a lot.
It is, yes.
Certainly we're able to get some movement around dividends, people that paid themselves through dividends. But again, proprietors that weren't on government payroll, there's a gap. And it's a gap that we keep bringing to the government's attention, that proprietors have a gap when it comes to how they look at revenue, because the government sees that as income. And if they remove that and just looked at net profit for those months, they could actually access the CERB, for example, ensuring that they get access to the financing through CEBA that they can't access right now if you don't have a payroll over 20,000 and less than 1.5 million. So we're asking the government to look at new ways to measurements, if they want to call it that, and criteria, so that entrepreneurs can access those programs. And I hope that when they roll out their rent abatement program, that again, it doesn't exclude entrepreneurs, especially those that don't have a payroll. That would just be it would decimate 25% of entrepreneurs in this country.
Oh,
so, we're looking at the government to fill these gaps, and we're hopeful that they're hearing about the gaps in their rollout. Again, they've been working very well with us, so we just need to continue to work with the government. But the time's running out. That's the biggest problem, is that again, we're 8 days away from round 2 of rent with no income, or businesses that are barely open. And people just, again, they're saying, do I walk away? And we're encouraging people to hang in there, and let's see what the government, their full suite of rollout is. And of course, the provincial governments are now looking at how they're going to respond as well, now that they've seen how the federal government is rolling out.
Sure. And again, thank you to all of the constituents of your riding and from right across the country, those of you tuning in and listening and posing these questions. We simply cannot understand the magnitude of the impact without having these sorts of conversations and with you supplying these questions to us. So again, thank you so very much. It's hard enough to be living and breathing this, but then to actually have to put the question together, that's a whole other level. So we appreciate these questions. Next question. This one's actually really interesting. So how can I start an incorporation or start a startup business and contribute to the economy, especially during COVID-19, if I'm not a citizen of Canada or here on a work permit?
That's a good question. I don't know if I can totally answer that. The most important thing is obviously going through immigration, ensuring that you have met the criteria that they've set out in terms of what you're allowed to do if you're a non-resident of Canada, or certainly not permanent resident, because there is, of course, there is opportunities, but there's strict guidelines. So I think it's very important that if you're living in Canada, you want to start a business, you're not a permanent resident, that you look at the criteria and ensure that you meet the criteria before you launch into anything. And I think just to say to anyone who's starting a business in the middle of this crisis, because there is also opportunities. We're hearing about new restaurant models that are coming up, people are creating businesses that are just in kitchens where they don't have storefront, they're not outward facing, and they're doing delivery, just straight up delivery. So unique, innovative businesses, a lot of tech and online startups are happening right now, and businesses that are expanding. My niece owns a business in Victoria called The Green Kiss, and she's just doing delivery and shipping right now, and she's doing a lot of business right now. So, I mean, she's just really turned her attention to her web-based side of her business, and it's exploding. So, I mean, there is ways to pivot and rethink and retool what you're doing. And I encourage people to have those conversations with their mentors, but also working with those organizations that are going to help you move towards, more of an online strategy. And of course, making sure you've got the distribution networks and you're looking at all of the various different things that come into play when you're looking at getting product to market.
And it's really interesting to see the role of gift cards right now. You're really seeing small businesses, even larger businesses for that matter, even chains saying, please buy these gift cards because when we come out of this, everybody's going to want to go out for dinner. And so if you already have your gift card purchased, it's really a benefit for everybody. You don't have to worry about getting your cash together or figuring out if you have enough money on your credit card. You've already got that gift card ready to go. And so I know that along with some of my colleagues, we're salivating at the thought of what restaurant are we going to go to first after COVID-19 is over. And living in Ottawa, the culinary scene is absolutely incredible. So it's really interesting to see the role of gift cards right now, just right across different sectors.
Yeah, e-cards are such a good way to support those small businesses in your community that you cherish and love. We've got a really great active group, programs through our chambers of commerce, the Alberni Valley Chamber, the Parksville Qualicum and chambers are both really pushing hard on the buy local campaigns. Businesses that are open, that are able to do business doing physical distancing. We've got a really great yoga business and health fitness business where they're actually giving people bikes to take home and they're doing online classes. Amy Hennikin from the fitness center in Parksville is doing that with her sister. They're keeping their business going online, but they're getting a lot of support, these businesses, through e-cards, and I'm impressed with the support, and people are committed to supporting these businesses. These businesses have a close connection to their culture and to their community, and so these are the businesses that contribute to the nonprofits, to the charitable sector when times are good. So they know how important they are and how important it is to support them in these difficult times. So yeah, get out there, get your e-cards going. There's a lot of people that if you've got a business that's been around for a while or people love your business, even if you're a startup, people will want to help you out. So that's a good way to generate some business.
Sure, and it's also something to look forward to, when get your new pair of shoes out or whatever it may be to go out for your first dinner post-COVID. Have you heard anything in Ottawa regarding easing restrictions for goods and people between Canada and the US? You're so close to the US. Is there any information about easing those restrictions at all?
We're not hearing that right now. In fact, we're hearing the opposite. I think our medical health officers talked about loosening things up slowly, very gradually, and soon. We've been very fortunate because of the late start that we had on spring break, that we were able to mitigate a lot of people traveling into areas where COVID was spreading. So we have very low number, especially on Vancouver Island. I think we have 100 cases of COVID, and that's with a population of 1 million. So we're very, very lucky, on Vancouver Island to have a handle on it. But we also know that we don't want to go and blow all the hard work that we've been doing, and people right across the country, and go too quickly. So our premier is advocating right now that we continue to keep the border closed until we really get a good analysis of how we're going to move forward. And when we do open things up, that we've got a lot of the physical distancing in place for the businesses and for the people that we invite back into British Columbia and into Canada, so that we are able to make sure that we don't have a big, huge spike immediately right after of the pandemic. But it is absolutely important. We have an integrated economy. In a lot of ways, we do more business with Washington and Oregon and British Columbia than we do with Ontario. So many sectors are very integrated, and we need to open up those channels of commerce as soon as possible. So it is something that we're looking at very closely, and it's very important to all of us.
And it's, I think, especially unique to your riding, from a geographical standpoint. Canada is so vast, but for those provinces that are so close to the US, it's another layer, another aspect to consider during COVID-19 regarding those restrictions and the barriers that are in place. So we're nearing our time flies when you're having fun, but we are nearing our conclusion. So I think we have time for 2 more questions, if that's all right with you, Gord.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, perfect. So the question that I have here is, how can my company receive support for programs that require project funds to gain revenue, specifically in relation to commercializing a technology?
There is a number of programs right now. There's like the SHRED program and various different programs through the federal government. And most important, contact your member of parliament. Talk to your member of parliament's office, your MLA's office. They should be able to direct you in the direction of what programs are available. The federal government, they also have the COVID emergency response, and so do the provincial governments. Mm-hmm. Go through all of those programs. There is absolutely got to be a program that you can work with. The BDC is very good at helping with identifying programs that you should be able to work with if you're, retooling, you're pivoting, moving towards, more of a tech outlook on your business or adapting your business. But there's many different opportunities for you to do that. And I'm with you. Stay positive. We are going to get through this. I know it's difficult for people. They feel like they're failing. We're not, people aren't failing. This is global. It's a global economic pandemic, and it's impacting everyone. And we're in this together. So please look to your fellow business people. Stand in solidarity on issues where you need help. Talk to your elected officials so that they're fighting for you to get the support you need to get through this. I absolutely encourage that.
And this is I'm looking at these questions, and it's interesting because another question we've talked about this, but I think it's a beautiful way to wrap everything up and conclude, and hopefully end on a high note here. The role of collaboration, and I mean that is, I think, of utmost importance right now. You mentioned the town hall that you had with the local legislative assembly government official, and really putting your ears and eyes out there to learn from your constituents, what they're facing. And so the question that was posed, but I think maybe we'll use this as a launching point for you to sort of wrap up and conclude, is that what sort of collaborative measures are in place with the local member of the Legislative Assembly to ensure that your constituents are being heard during COVID-19? And I think your riding is a beautiful case study for, what can be done, and certainly measures that are working in terms of really being able to hear from the individuals that are living and breathing in your riding.
So for me, in my riding, I'm talking to my MLA regularly. His team is working closely with ours, making sure that we've got information on what the province is rolling out. They have information about what the federal government's doing. We're talking about the gaps. I meet with my MLA once a week for an hour. Wow. Every week, absolutely. And he's also a cabinet minister in the provincial government of British Columbia. So it's absolutely essential that we're meeting. I talk to our chambers of commerce all the time, if not daily, many of them, talking about individual businesses, what they're facing, how we can support them. But also I've done a number of Zoom meetings with chambers of commerce, going right out and listening to businesses on the ground, hearing from them, and talking on the phone, working the phones every day, all day long, literally hearing from people, bringing that back to those MP meetings and my meetings with other parliamentarians. Of course, my caucus is meeting regularly. We're spending probably 5-6 hours a day on conference calls and in meetings, bringing to the attention of government the concerns we're hearing from people and their stories. So there's a lot of collaboration going on right now from all levels of government. The Indigenous leadership has been phenomenal in my riding. There's issues that have surfaced that are definitely Indigenous related, whether it be the wage subsidy that they can't access because they're limited partnerships. So we need to go to the government and ask them to remove these barriers so that we protect these jobs and these really fragile, important businesses to our economy. So the collaboration has been phenomenal, and I hope that we can work together like this in the future. We've never seen in 153 years of our country, politicians from all political parties working across party lines like we are right now, and the importance of having diverse representation in our country of different political parties. And I'm really proud of, my party, the NDP. We've made it very clear from the get-go that we want to make sure that every policy that rolls out is about people. Not just big corporations and big banks and big money. And this is quite different than 2008, in terms of the recession and how that rolled out. We're seeing a lot more rollout that is geared towards workers, geared towards saving small business people and their jobs, and we need to do more. So that's what they're going to get from us in terms of the leadership that we're going to bring and the collaboration that we're going to bring to our partners from across political parties and across regions, because we've got more in common as Canadians from coast to coast to coast than we don't. So, you know, that's what we're focused on, is what we have in common, and that's what we care. We care about small business people, and we care about the people, the economic generators of our communities, and like I said, also the contributors, the people that donate to our local charities and organizations. So what you're hearing from me is we're deeply committed to helping you get through it, and let's come out stronger, and let's help each other along the way. And we need that collaboration with you and with each other, and even your competitors at this time, because everyone's facing the same challenge. You're not alone.
That was a beautiful summary, Gordon. What a beautiful way to conclude. So thank you on behalf of Startup Canada for speaking with us, speaking to the audience, and being present for these types of conversations. We so appreciate it. We hope to be able to host you again and hopefully see you in person in Ottawa in the not too distant future. Thank you to all of you tuning in today. I hope that everyone has a good day despite, you know, the COVID-19 circumstances. Let's remember what Gord has said. You know, we are in this together. Collaboration is key. The role of mentorship. So on that note, thank you. Have a great day. Take care.
Thanks.